Hey, what's up, it's your boy Angled.libertarian here. I haven't made a video in quite a while, and I'm not happy about that. The reason is I've had quite a bit of writer's block recently with a lot of stuff going on with university, getting back into the groove of things. But I broke this block by making this PowerPoint presentation here. The reason I made this is my girlfriend understands libertarianism, but she's not very invested in politics and economics. So I want to explain why I always say I don't want the governments to be the ones to try and fix a problem. It's not simply just because as libertarians we have bias, there is a whole methodology behind this. And so this is to explain to everyone who says, well, why do the libertarians just hate the government? Why don't they just let them provide this service? Why don't they just let them fix this problem in society? It's because they will make it worse. And I want to show you why that is. It's not simply just we don't like it. There is a whole big reason fundamental to the way government operates, is funded and is structured, especially compared to the private sector. So here is your host, me, Anglo-libertarian, PhD of Sneconomics, says so right there, and there's my certificate to prove it. So, like I said, private versus public. We're going to look at how both of them function. Competition. This is what makes the private sector function. You make money by doing a better job of providing something than someone else. Because if someone else does a better job of providing something, they'll go to them and give them their money instead of you. So if you want to make money, you need to be the best around at providing this service. There's the profit motive. So by you providing this service at the best price and the best possible quality, you are going to earn money. How good is that? It's in your own self-interest to fulfill the self-interest of other people. This is what makes the world go round. Because of this, you will generally always see rising quality and falling prices when the market is not tampered with, specifically because of competition. Consumers will go to another company if they can get a better quality product for the same price, or the same quality product for a lower price. If they can get both, a better quality product and a lower price, then it's an easy win. This is a perpetual system that goes on and on and on, of quality rising and prices falling. This is why you can go to the supermarket, pick up a loaf of bread for a good price and know it's not going to kill you. Even if there weren't government food regulations in place, who is going to buy loaves of bread laced with rat poison? No one. It makes absolutely no sense, so it would make no sense for a company to do that. You can have this view of competition of being literally how the world functions, how problems get solved, how the best things come to fruition. Government regulation almost plays no part in this. Moving on. Consumer demand directs resources. An example I once heard, I think it was on like the Tom Woods podcast, was in the Soviet Union in the 1950s probably could have made an iPad. If they really committed to putting all the resources of that entire massive country together, they probably could have pulled it off. But who would have bought an iPad in the 1950s? It would have been technically worthless. The reason being that there are not enough resources to go around to facilitate a market demand of it. As such, consumers will demand much more reasonable things. There was no demand for iPads in the 1950s, but there were demands for ovens and microwaves, toasters, this new sort of home economic technology. As such, prices tell the market what consumer demand is, and where resources are always best placed to facilitate the demands of the most amount of people. Governments do not have this. So the way you achieve the profit motive, one way is to keep costs down. That necessitates innovation in capital structure. You need to figure out what the cheapest way to produce something is while also maintaining quality. That includes capital and labour structure. To go back to using bread as an example, if the workers in a bread factory are being paid 3 times the median salary of the country, well then bread's going to be very, very unaffordable and not many people are going to be able to buy it. So you might say it sounds bad that bread workers have to have their salaries cut, but it is so everyone else can afford the good. It is not simply as selfish as the CEOs trying to take the largest cut of the pie for themselves. It is about necessitating demand. And that is you. That is the everyday consumer. That is the working class. These are people who demand goods at a certain price and a certain level of quality. It is up to the job of the firm to facilitate the demand at the best quality and the lowest price. So if you have a lower price, you will have more of the market share. More people will be buying from you compared to your competitors. What does that mean? You make more money. So you are absolutely incentivized to constantly raise the quality and lower the prices of goods. Again, part of this perpetual cycle. And we've seen it play out throughout history. Imagine the quality of eyeglasses in the 1850s. Probably didn't help your eyesight at all, and only the very rich could afford them. So why is it now that just about anyone can afford really good quality eyeglasses to enhance their vision if they're short-sighted or long-sighted? It's because of this. It's because of competition and the profit motive, increasing the quality of goods, dropping their prices, effectively directing resources, streamlining production, and at the end of it all, making people more money. Everyone is happier because of this. So now how does the public sector work? No competition, no motive for efficiency, and no rational direction of resources. So when you have none of these three things, how are you supposed to satisfy the wants of the most amount of consumers at the highest quality and the lowest price? There needs to be some sort of mechanism in here to achieve that. It's not magical, it's the way that things play out. So how does the government play out? Bureaucracy and administration have no streamlining procedure, so they just go out of control. This is why, for example, there are over 4,000 federal criminal laws in the United States. This is why state governments and federal governments and departments and agencies are constantly expanding, because there is no check to determine how much is the correct amount of employees to have. It just keeps on going up. Whenever a department or agency runs into a problem, they never say it's a problem with the agency or the department itself, it's because they're underfunded, we're told. So if a company is putting out a bad product at a very high price, what's going to happen to the company? They're going to go bankrupt. Unless, of course, they have a lot of political ties. What happens when a government institution is underperforming with terrible quality and massive cost to the taxpayer? What happens? Oh, well, clearly we need more money from the taxpayer. And because no one can actually say no, the government says to the government, okay, you can have more of not your money. It's not my money, so I don't care where it goes. I took it from someone who had no choice but to give it to me. So we get another perpetual cycle here, opposite of the private one. Prices constantly increase as the bureaucracy bloats and more taxes have to be collected, and you constantly get decreasing quality of service of whatever industry it is that they've decided to nationalise. Things only get worse. Here's an example of bureaucracy creating higher prices. So on the left here, this is how the NHS has grown, which if you're not from the UK, is our National Health Service. And this is unfortunately a graph from an American study. However, I don't think it's unsafe to assume at all that you can imagine a similar trend in this American growth of physicians compared to administrators to having in the UK. They are structured quite similarly. So if we take this right-hand chart with a grain of salt and say we can expect something similar in the UK, obviously not exact. Well, look how close this correlation is. Look at the uptake in the late 80s of budget and the early 90s of administrators booming in America. Again, it's not far-fetched to say this would be very, very similar in the UK. So imagine how much of this NHS budget here is paying for administrators, not actually doctors. Paying for not just receptionists who work in the surgeries, but mostly menial pencil-pushing administration jobs in headquarters, not even in hospitals. And if administrators are there to keep track of physicians, well, surely this makes no sense in this great uptake, does it? At this point, when administration takes off like a rocket at this speed, clearly the administrators are simply administering each other. It must be absolutely useless to have such a spiral of administration when the budget over here shows a massive constant increase, but yet we're always told it is underfunded and it needs saving at all times. This clearly cannot be true. Clearly the problem isn't the budget, it's where the budget is going. And like I said, this will always happen because public sector services do not have the incentivizing institutions that private ones do. There is no need for efficiency when there is no competition. If a company's revenues on a chart look like this, the company would think they are absolutely smashing it out of the park. But obviously the NHS isn't, because we are told every year it's underfunded. And so, are they really underfunded at all? As budgets increase, the administrative drain does on a 1-to-1 ratio. Like I said, if we take this with a grain of salt, you can absolutely imagine the growth of administrators following a nearly 1-to-1 correlation with budget. That's total speculation on my end, but I'm willing to put money on it. Now, if you live in the UK, I don't know if you've been to an accident and emergency room anytime soon, but the last time I did, It was literally a construction site. That is not a joke, and I know that this is only an anecdote. There was building work going on inside, taking up half of the A&E ward, while people with broken legs had to just sit there and wait to be sorted out. If we imagine how much of the budget that I showed you before is going towards administrators that don't even work in the hospital, they work around the corner in some sort of administrative building, if that's where the budget's going, then of course the A&E department is going to start receiving less and less and less as the administrative growth continues. The healthcare service is less about providing healthcare and becomes increasingly about fulfilling diversity quotas and being seen as a job provider, not a service provider. That is completely backwards. And so just giving more and more money to these departments without addressing the real problem of where the money is going is only going to make it worse when you increase the amount of money going towards it. For example here, look how much the government is spending on the NHS. You want the government to spend more, and it's spending over a quarter when inequality is where it's at in our current time compared to the beginning of the NHS, which everybody looks on fondly and says, oh, it was so good. Look at the massive difference in budget that was required to hold up good quality. As the government institution started out, it had relatively low prices and relatively high quality. It is not the fault of a particular government party that the NHS has become so bad in the modern era. It's the way it's always going to go. Because there is no efficiency, because there is no competition, because there is no skin in the game. The NHS doesn't suffer for underperforming. It gets more money. It gets people lining the streets saying, give the NHS more money. You don't give more money to a company that is failing. So why do you give more money to a government institution that is failing? It's completely backwards, and it will only incentivize more failure. And this is what it's costing us. Bear in mind, this is before the COVID outbreak we have now. Imagine how much higher this is with the insane bailouts that Rishi Sunak has given to companies because of the COVID relief plan. This graph is going to be huge when we get a fully up-to-date one. And it shows we can't carry on doing what we are doing. And what about America, I hear you ask? If you advocate for any sort of even reforming the NHS, let alone advocating its privatisation, you will hear, oh, well, you just want this to be like America. Everyone says America is so bad because it's privatised. This is a massive problem for these sorts of people. How much of healthcare spending in each country is either of these? So, social healthcare, private healthcare. Let's look at the UK. So, per person, every year, in US dollars, measured in US dollars, the UK government spends just over $3,000 per person in the UK. Now, let's compare this to the private, in air quotes, American system. The government there spends about $4,500 tax dollars per person per year. So that is about a 33% increase in compared to the UK government spending on healthcare. How can the American healthcare service be private at all when it is spending so much more tax money on healthcare than even England is with socialised healthcare? It's ridiculous. The reason that the American healthcare system is so screwed up is because users of it are hit with a double whammy. You must pay this massive tax burden, but then also pay the hospital itself. So the hospital is getting a double dose here because you have to pay the hospital and then the government pays the hospital. All you get in America is the worst of both worlds. The problem with American healthcare is not that it is too private, it is obviously that it is not private enough. The government is far too involved and spends far too much money, which introduces onto a private sector the problems of the public sector. So you get the private sector, but without the competition, without the streamlining, and you double the profit motive because you're not just making money for providing someone with a better service, you're making money no matter what you do because the government's always going to be there to back you up. So you don't need to do a good job. The government's going to pay you one way or another, and the client is going to pay you one way or another. So, if even in America, private institutions have been turned so bad by public involvement, what are the solutions? You can completely get government out of these sectors, no questions asked, gone 100%. Or you can fix the administrative problems and restructure where the money goes. So you address the main problem at hand, which is that resources are not efficiently allocated. You can take a heavy hand, go into these services, rip out the area of parasitic loss, but while doing so, unemploying thousands and thousands of people who viewed things like the NHS or public schooling as a job, not a service. They viewed it there to give them a salary, not for them to provide anything. Because governments always use these public services as job providers during times of crisis. Now, what's the problem with these solutions? No one is going to vote for either of them because of, like I said, it will unemploy a lot of people, which is unfortunate, but why were they employed in the first place? So what's the conclusion here? It's all fucked, no matter what you do. And it will always become fucked, so just don't let the government stick its fingers in there in the first place. That's the only solution. Once government gets involved in an area, it will only go downhill. Because if you give the government an inch, it will take a mile. It has none of the incentivization of providing services and getting paid, and it has none of the de-incentivization of providing bad services because you get paid anyway when it's taxes, so you don't have any sort of worry. There is no personal risk involved for regulators. And when there is no risk, you can just do whatever the hell you want without consequence. How is that ever going to work out well? And to play us out here, we've got a cool monkey listening.
Intelligent bad guy in order to abolish all types of welfare. Guarantee that only bad people will rise to the top.
Democracy is the god that failed. Anarchism is the only answer, my friends. Even the world's most stringent constitution in the United States could not stop this sort of government overreach. Take it easy.